Now, tonight I'm speaking to you as a professor. I'm also speaking to you as an alum. I was the first of 16 that have attended Seton Hall University. Number 14 just graduated in January. Number 15 is graduating in May, and number 16 is graduating next May. So we're out there trying to get the students to come, for sure. And there's been a Rondinell teaching at Seton Hall since 1962. Now, I know I have the gray hair, but I have not been teaching since 1962. I'm talking about my dad, who taught there for 34 years as well. And I'm really blessed to practice what I love. I'm a filmmaker and still, film producer. I also teach what I love, and I don't think my students really realize this, that I actually probably get more out of it from them than they get out of me. Their energy, their ideas, just the way they think, just fascinates me, and it just gives me a whole different perspective on my own work and on how they're seeing the world, which is very enlightening. And I also get to teach at a university that I love. I'm a big Seton Hall supporter, and it's done a lot for me and my family, and it's made me who I am as a professional today. I want to thank the panel. The bios are in. The bios are in the programs. You know who they are. I'm just going to talk a little bit how I know them. Glenn Gares, wave there. He's a screenwriter. I know Glenn through a mutual friend, my producing partner for 30 years, and I've met him out in New York, and I'm glad he can join us here tonight. Jim Tartanella, who I know the name. I just couldn't figure out who he was until I saw him tonight, and I go, oh, I know you. Now, I tell a story to my students every year about that. At Seton Hall University, we have the equipment on the shelves. If the equipment is on the shelves and no one has checked it out, you can take the equipment, and that includes during the summer, because I trust you. We've never had a problem with students taking the equipment out and using it, because it should be used. It shouldn't be sitting on a shelf, correct? So I tell a story about a student one time that I let him use the equipment over the summer, and I walked into the editing room during the summer, and he was editing a wedding video. And I was like, I admire the entrepreneurial spirit. I said, that is really smart. And that was Jim. So now I can tell him that was Jim Tartanella who did that. And Tom Hinkle, and they were classmates together. I didn't realize that either tonight. Tom Hinkle, who has gone down in infamous history with me, he did my first experience with Tom was in TV2, where they had to do their own original television show. And he did a show called Palo Alto. And he gave me the script, and it was about the Klingons from Star Trek? It was about a stuttering Klingon with an English accent who was killing English majors at the university, okay? And I read the script, but that's not the weird part. The weird part had Polish subtitles, okay? So I remember reading the script and calling you into my office and saying, Tom, I just don't get it, Tom. I don't understand what you're doing. And you looked me in the eye and you explained it to me, and I don't know what you said, because I said, just do it. Just go ahead and do it. And that show it's a video that's still ahead of its time, because it actually plays on Pirate TV. It's in rotation. To this day, I refuse to take it off. For 1998, I think, when you made that. It's still on TV on Seton Hall's campus. So that's Tom. Anyway, but I'm going to give you some context to what our discussion is on this idea of digital media in the 21st century, and I think some of you are going to be able to relate to this pretty well. I remember when I was 10 years old, in 1969, rushing home from school to see our first new color TV, okay? Do you remember when TV shows used to go on the air and said, in color, right? Remember Batman? In color. And now I was going to get to watch TV in color. And when I tell my students this, and this is in my lifetime, they can't understand. Remember, it was a big piece of furniture that was in the room. And we used to see up close and lay on the floor and have to turn the knob, because there was no remote, remember? And you used to get yelled at by your folks, you're going to lose your eyes, right? You're going to ruin your eyes, but you had to sit there because you wanted to turn channels, okay? I was 16 in 1975 when we had our first cable hookup, okay? And that's when we had our first remote. At 26, I had my first home VHS video camera. I do not have a wedding video, okay? Because I was pre-VHS, okay? Pre-home recording. So we're talking about VHS, which we don't even have anymore, correct? My first laptop was a Mac with 4 megabytes of RAM, okay? That cost me $2,800 when I was in 1990. I was 31 years old, okay? And so there, I get rid of my typewriter and the onion skin paper. Remember the onion skin paper we used to all use because we didn't want to use the liquid paper, right? All that kind of stuff. I still have screenplays that I wrote, handwritten in pencil, in loose leaf notebooks, the original drafts that's how we used to write it with, typing it. You gave it to a typist to type it up at the end after you had your draft done, okay? At 40, in 1999, it was the first time I was editing digitally, because we used to always do editing by hands. It was very tactile. It was very much something that you can get your hands on. And that was one of the reasons why, actually, I'll talk about it a little later, why I got out of film editing, because I was in 1999 when we went digital. I got my first cell phone in 2003, okay? And it was not a smartphone. It wasn't very smart, because I got my first smartphone in 2007, okay? Now, this has all happened in my lifetime. And when I look at it, I am completely amazed about what has happened in my lifetime. I can't fathom what's going to happen in the next 40 years, 50 years, in terms of media and how it's delivered to us and how we're all going to be interacting. In the coming years, I understand we're going to have the iWatch. I think it's coming out in the spring, correct? I think we're going to have Google Glasses. There was somebody with Google Glasses at commencements. I remember him on the stage, right? And he was broadcasting, I guess, to the world his experience of the graduation. And virtual reality glasses, I think, are here now, and they're going to be developed and perfected more. Things that weren't even perceived 10 years ago. For someone like me who's just become comfortable with Facebook, because I was yelling at some of you people, I know some of you, my former students here, that I didn't even know you were working in the industry, that you need to connect with me on Facebook so I know what you're doing, has become passé, believe it or not. It's for old people now, so it's for us. I mean, for some of us in this room, evidently students don't use Facebook anymore. And students don't use email anymore. Did you know that? They don't check their email anymore. We think we're so great, sending them emails. They're not even checking email anymore. Now it's Twitter, and it's Tumblr, and it's Yik Yak, and it's Fade, and it's Instagram, and it's Vine, and it's Snapchat, which sends out a six-second video and then supposedly disappears forever, unless somebody takes a screenshot of it, which people don't realize you can do that. I didn't know you could do that, but this younger generation can. All this access to media, social and tradition, it's really also changing the way audiences are getting the information as well, okay? Variety reports that domestic movie theater box office is down 15% this year. It's the lowest in a decade. And they say that the biggest contributor is more discerning audiences because people are tweeting and doing social media when they come walking out of the movie theaters and saying, this movie, don't waste $12, $10, whatever you have to pay to go see this movie. They're warning their friends of less satisfying films. And what's being lost with that, I believe, is a communal experience of watching a film in an audience with people. It's a very different experience. And having been a filmmaker who makes films and goes to film festivals, I love watching my movies with an audience because I know what's coming and I can watch the audience and how they react. That's part of what we're trying to do here is communicate, right? So if I can see that communally, it makes me better, I think, as a communicator, but it also makes me more aware of what I'm communicating and how it's being consumed. So the communal experience is starting to go away, or at least lessened. Variety also reports that millennials, 18 to 23-year-olds, are watching non-streaming TV. I'm sorry, they're not watching non-streaming TV. In other words, the non-streaming TV is broadcast television. It's on at 8 o'clock, and watch at 8 o'clock. And 50% of them now are watching it in time-shifted positions, which means that it's been recorded, they can watch it on their own, okay? That's changed everything, and I'm sure my panelists will be able to talk about that as well, much more than I can. Nielsen, who does the ratings, is adding mobile devices to their ratings now because they know most of my students are watching on their phones or on their iPads, which now that I teach them says we have to frame differently because now it's a small screen not a big screen like this. So you have to know where this thing is going to end up at some point, because it's going to change how you shoot something and how you actually get it to the audience. Time-shifted viewing, like I said, is up 16% of all ages. 70% of Americans call themselves binge watchers. Now, who's a binge watcher here? Okay? Yes, I did the second season of House of Cards in 2 days. Okay? On that Friday that it came out, I was on there refreshing. Oh, it's up. Oh, boom, I'm going to start watching it. So my wife and I sat there and we went right through the whole thing, right? That's what people do. That's binge watching. YouTube now is a distribution outlet. I used to be very anti-YouTube because I called YouTube everybody putting up their home movies and nobody watching. But now it has become organized and it's become now a distribution outlet. There's new media sensations. Brittany Moda, who is a blogger with 7.2 YouTube followers. That's 7.2 people. Okay? Sean Dawson, a comedian and musician, has 6.2 followers. And they are now all represented by the old Hollywood unions, UTA, United Talent Agency. Okay? In fact, CBS had this great idea. We're going to get to one of these bloggers that have 5 or 6 million followers, and we want this blogger to mention our new TV series on CBS. And she said she had to talk to my people. They wanted $250,000 for her to make a mention on her blog because she has a following, right? So can you blame them? I mean, it's really remarkable when you think about it, because a hit TV show in prime time only gets 3.5 million viewers. And then what is exactly a follower versus a viewer? What's the difference between a follower and a viewer? I'm telling you as a follower, I have something I want you to watch. You're not finding me. So click channel surfing, talking to your friends. You subscribe to me, and I tell you when I have something for you to watch. It's a whole different way to approach media and distribution of media and getting an audience to watch your product. And I was talking to somebody before about video on demand, right? Where is he? Andre, right?
Yep.
Yes, because I have a film that's coming out on video on demand too in December, because that's the distribution outlet where the money can go directly to the people that make it rather than going through a distribution arm. And that is radically changing the industry as well. Gone is the day to inaccessibility to equipment. Now, when I was their age, we had to go get the film equipment that was very specialized, very expensive, and was very, it was had at schools, okay? And we had to be skilled and trained. You guys know, you had those film classes, and we had to remember loading the Bolex, and then the sprockets, and all that, the Fresolini thing. I remember all that, the cameras that we used to have. You had to have that special training to how to use that. And also, you had to learn how to use the editing machinery and the editing equipment. And the equipment was very expensive, and you need to have that housed in an academic unit for people to have access. Well, now that's gone. Okay? Because now people are shooting with cell phones. They're shooting with the 5D, the 7Ds, which are basically still cameras that shoot video now. And so everybody has access to video. In fact, now we teach a course at Seton Hall for our PR and journalism students called Basic Video Production, which is teaching students how to shoot on the cell phone. Because they can do their newscasts with that, they can do PR campaigns with that. And so we saw a need for that, and we developed this course. It's very popular, and we found an alum that does this, and she teaches it for us. Because it's just because you can point the camera doesn't mean you know how to shoot. That's a whole nother thing as well that we'll talk about in a second. So we all have access to video, right? Now, what are the police? Have you noticed what was just reported in the last couple of weeks? Police departments are now doing. Anybody have you been following that? They're putting body cams on their police officers because the people out there are shooting them with their phones and their video cameras, and so now they want to get their perspective on exactly what happened instead of seeing it from the perspective of whoever was perpetrator or a bystander, for that matter. It's mostly bystanders. And what I find myself doing as a professor that teaches film and video production, I do a lot of unteaching. In fact, at open houses, when I'm at the open houses, I have these students, they come up to me, prospective students, they say, Professor Rondinella, I don't have any video experience, so I have no film experience at all. I mean, I know students that are above it, they shoot video, and I go, oh, you're what I want. I don't want anybody coming in with that they think they know what they're doing. Because just because you have access to a camera, just because you have access to the technology, does not make you a film or video maker. Correct, gentlemen? Right. So we have learned that because everybody thinks that they know how to do it because they know how to push a button on it. Editing applications now are they have editing applications that will actually edit the video for you. Have you tried them? No, you haven't tried them? You should try them. They're pretty funny. They don't really work. And Jim is going to attest to this as well, as I got out of editing when it became less tactile, where I couldn't touch it with my hands, and I couldn't get the scars on my fingers to still prove it from the razor blades, hitting my fingers and the splicing and all that kind of stuff. I just felt like the digital realm was, people started learning how to push buttons, and they all thought they were editors now, where they didn't understand the skill and the thought and the time that has to go in, and the training that goes into the appreciation of the skill of film editing. Now it's just, we throw it on the wall, we hit the undo button, no, it didn't work, we didn't do it. It's just like throwing spaghetti on the wall, and that's what I call it most of the time. It's kind of like somebody saying, hey, I just got QuickBooks, I'll be your accountant. That's really what it comes down to. When people tell me, oh, I have the editing software, I'm an editor. Well, you're not really. So it's a very changing landscape. And so with that context in mind, I'm going to throw out my first question to the panel here, and it's going to go to Tom, right? And I'm going to move over there, so I'm not standing here. Is like, how will the interactive nature of digital filmmaking define funding, storytelling, and distribution? Because you're into development, correct?
Yep. Well, we didn't get to say how we met you, which just came to me. This wasn't planned. Like most of my college classes, I'd show up unprepared. That's why I was in communications. But I met Professor Rondinella, and technology has grown exponentially, which we could get into, but so has professor's title. He wasn't a professor when I was there, and he has grown exponentially in title, not size. But when I first met him, I thought, okay, well, I had come from another college I wasn't happy at, and I was like, oh, well, this is a Catholic school. I'm Catholic, but I'm not super religious, and I'm concerned that he only does, TV shows and movies about the Bible, and it's not necessarily my wheelhouse. And I said, so what are you working on? And what I liked was that he was an active producer and filmmaker and director and writer. So what are you working on? I asked him somewhat intelligently, I thought, and he said, well, Tom, did one of those finger things. Happy you asked. I'm working on this film right now. It's about a guy and a lawnmower, and the lawnmower comes to life and kills everyone. And that's when
it's the best kill a lawnmower movie ever made.
Called Blades. You can get it on iTunes, probably.
I get an email a month about that movie. It was just honored last year. I had a retrospective screening in Philadelphia on that movie, 25 years. Yeah, it's not that bad. It's bad. It's Jaws. It's Jaws on a golf course, is what it is.
But I remember thinking how contemporary and creative Seton Hall was, and it wasn't just this super religious school, but like you explained, technology has gone from us using these film cameras and editing on film and having to splice everything. I actually still have a Seton Hall splicer at home that says Seton Hall on it. I should give that back, but it doesn't matter anymore. But we shot these with these really bad cameras, but we had access to the cameras, and it took a really long time to shoot, a really long time to edit, and we shot TV shows together. And they looked really bad.
Good and bad.
They were composed well, I thought, but just technologically they didn't look great. We didn't have $1 million cameras as well. They cost probably $60,000 for a good camera at the time,
right.
Probably.
Right.
And now you can shoot a show on your cell phone. In fact, they've done movies on iTunes that sell and make a lot of money shooting from your phone. My sister shot a little movie with her cell phone and showed it at a movie theater. It looked fantastic. And so what I'm noticing is, so I'm a buyer now in television. I run comedy at TBS. But what I'm noticing is that, and it's actually a great thing that this is happening because it's opening the world to creative people that maybe at the time didn't have access to money or equipment. Now you can shoot a movie with your phone. That guy Shane Dawson you're talking about, I think he's horrible, but he has a massive audience. And you can shoot, and if you're a creative person, you could shoot something and get people to see it. And what that's doing is, when I was watching TV as a kid, you'd watch, Alf and Who's the Boss?
Oh,
And
great.
Jim's favorite. And Who's the Boss basically is a show about who's the boss. Is it Angela? She hired him. Or is it Tony? But he's sort of like in charge. So who's really the boss? I mean, I'm kidding, but you never know that's what the TV show was, or Alf. Mm-hmm. And those people that made those shows made probably close to literally $500 million, a ton of money, for doing terrible television because there are only 3 networks. And now, because there's such a greater outlet for creativity, started with HBO and Sopranos, which just launched this, we don't have to watch CBS, NBC, and ABC. We can, as long as we can find it, as long as we know where to watch it, we can find a show that's fantastic. And so it upped the game of the networks. And so now you'll see movie actors that have never done television before and swore it off, television's gross, I'm not gonna do Alf. Now they want to do TV. And so it's a positive shift because of the digital
Interesting.
evolution.
All right, well, Glenn, what new forms of storytelling are emerging as a screenwriter?
As it's my index card. Because I very much buy into digital. I don't think that storytelling itself will ever change. I don't think it ever has. I don't think it ever will. The basics of stories are always going to be the same. What has changed, as you guys have sort of said, is who can make art and how it gets to an audience. And the who can make it is now anyone. Literally, we all have movie studios in our pockets. And it can go anywhere. And it will very soon be in our watches, in our glasses, in our refrigerators. You're going to have TV coming out of your eyes. Which means that sort of everything from the beginning of movies, from like 1895 to about 2005, 2007, is sort of one period, and it's over. And the things that we're talking about, it's almost 10 years after it started, and we're sort of like saying, oh my God, this is all happened. It happened 10 years ago. And everything that we know about the form of movies, over. Shape, there's no more 2 hours. Things can be very short. There's people that make movies 7 minutes, 13 hours, 26 hours, all those rules are gone. Games, comics, blogs, novels, webisodes, those are all gonna sort of blur together. It takes a while to get into the mainstream, but it's already starting. My son, he's 13, he hasn't watched TV in a year and a half. Everything is YouTube and some streaming devices, that's it. Now and then we'll get him to sit down and watch a half hour of John Oliver, that's it. And I think that what that means is that anything is possible as far as storytelling, as far as form goes. Literally anything is possible, because it's going to depend on what particular outlet and what particular production group is making it. And I think that what you have to look at, and I tend to think, I tend to speak to people who are trying to get into the business, and so the question is not really like, what do they want, what are they doing? You're a little bit of what do they want. you're the people who are actually signing the checks. But mostly the thing that you're going to be looking for when you look at the form is, who am I and what can I do? What do I do well and what do I have the ability to do? And that's what you're going to do. And it's no longer going to be a question of can I do it? It's going to be a question of how do you get people to see it? And it's going to be a question of nobody, there's not really going to be a number one like there used to be. There used to be a central thing in the world, the number one movie. Frankly, the number one movie isn't that important anymore because the number one game is selling more and the number one YouTube video is showing more. And the fact is that there's going to be a lot of number ones. There's going to be a lot of places to see things and a lot of places where people are doing things. So storytelling is just going to fit wherever you can find a place.
Okay. Jim, the new digital environment, it has a redefining the production process. We were talking about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it's redefining it in a huge way. First, I'd like to say I really like the way Gabriel showed in the first couple minutes of this video. I really think you have a future in this town. You have a very good look. Let's talk afterwards. I would like to say that when I thought about what we were talking about earlier, I didn't bring it. We were talking about how it's redefining the process, and I think Tom and Glenn, hit on big heads, and I think you hit it earlier. I think the biggest was that you talked about everyone being an editor. You just have to learn how to press the buttons. Well, guess what? Now everyone is a director. Everyone is a writer, and everyone's an editor. Mm-hmm. And I think what I've seen, because what I do as an editor, if Glenn is the restaurateur, and if Tom's the restaurateur and Glenn is the chef, well, I'm the line cook, because I'm putting it together. So what I've noticed is that I do get to editing, as you said, you felt it got less tactile. Well, I feel it's more tactile than ever as an editor, because the shift of creativity has left, I believe, the producers and shifted to the edit bay. Because when I put together, especially in non-scripted and reality, I feel like digital media has given us a whole new avenue to create. So I feel that as an editor, it's a positive shift for myself, and we are able to do so much more, because before, film cost money. Like you said, you had to put way more thought into what you were going to shoot, how you were going to edit it. Well, guess what the undo button did? The undo button gave me a voice as an editor, because now I get to show people, I think what you wrote's pretty good, but can I show you what I thought about? And it can work. So I think it gave the editor, digital media has given the editor a whole new avenue. And I think that it has redefined my process exponentially.
Yeah, actually, it's like writing, like you were talking about the onions. If I wrote a scene and I decided to rethink a sentence, I would have to retype the page. If the page ran over now, I would have to retype the entire script. That really made me reluctant to change things.
Right.
Now it's like, yeah, sure, I'm gonna cut, I'm gonna paste, it's gonna move. So creatively, there's nothing between you and what you wanna do.
Exactly.
And there's no question that it's better creative.
All right, well, let me, as a follow-up to that, let me ask you this. So then, you're saying that anybody with a cell phone who has an inkling of an idea, of a concept, and go out and shoot something and do something that actually might be successful. But realistically, how often does that happen?
You put it perfectly before, and this, I think we're going to get into this later, about how educators need to harness new technology, is that unfortunately, anyone could be an editor, anyone could be a writer, and more importantly than ever, is to go back to the foundations and simple storytelling techniques, because that's what they really need to learn.
Well, anyone can't be a good editor.
Exactly. You can have a zillion of them.
Big
It doesn't mean everyone could be a restaurateur. You know what I mean? Like, your wife cooks.
Yeah.
Do you want to go home every night? Don't answer that. You're Italian. I get that.
Actually.
Exactly.
An audience isn't going to watch something really bad. So therefore, although anyone can be an editor, 95% of the people are going to drop out.
Right.
Because.
So let's follow up. Let me follow up again. So what is really changing? Is it the creators are changing, or the audiences are changing?
I think both.
I think neither.
I think it's
You think it's the same?
that's fair. I think it's a fluid process.
Yeah, I think the means of access and the means of production are changing, but all that's doing is making it more flexible and available, and it's basically breaking down the control, as you said and you were talking about before. I mean, there was this time when it was just impossible to make a movie. It was so amazing in the 60s when independent film started, people like said, oh, I can get a camera and I can make a movie. And the very fact that they made a movie at all was so remarkable that you would go watch it.
Right.
And that's only because it was so difficult to make it, and because the theaters were owned by a very specific group of people, and you could not get your movie into. John Cassavetes had to rent theaters. He could not get his movies into theaters, and
It's still happening.
Right.
I know
So
people
the
were
thing
making movies and renting theaters.
Right.
But it's so much cheaper now because
Right.
it's.
So what's going to happen now is, because you no longer have anything standing in the way of producing or releasing the work, it's not going to change the basic nature of the audience, or it's not going to change the basic nature of the creators. It's just going to allow a much bigger pool of both sides, and you're going to get smaller audiences, just like with music. I mean, what happened, music was just ahead of,
Right.
of the other arts in that it broke down, but now there's more good music, and you can get it more easily.
I disagree. That's what I was going to ask
By the way,
for
this
Tom.
is real debate, what you're seeing. Live.
Yeah.
This question actually is a reference to Tom, because I think you just made a point. I disagree with you that music's gotten better. I feel like it's a genre that has lost a foothold and now is like a region of hit makers because.
Well, there's
So
mainstream. That's like
my
saying-
question
Yeah,
to Tom
Tom,
is,
yeah, yeah.
as an ingredient
Finally.
picker, as an ingredient picker, when you're buying, how has things like YouTube, Twitter, hits, things like that, does that affect what you choose to produce now?
Great question. Here's the thing, and you're all hinting on it. Even though you're getting to witness so many more creative people. I agree with you that I don't think audiences are changing. I don't think creators are changing. You're seeing more creators because you're getting access to them. What's not changing is, all right, take the sport of baseball. There are so many little kids that want to be a great baseball player. There are only so many that are born with the talent that can really do it.
Right.
And what I probably in a year hear, I don't know, I would say probably 500 pitches. And these are TV show pitches, not from Joe down the street. Though in this town, Joe down the street's probably like a great, writer or something.
I heard he was sick.
Yeah,
really.
So these are 500 pitches from people that are working in this business that know their stuff. Of those 500, I buy 10, and that's not because of budget. That's because 490 suck. And it makes my job easy, because when you hear the pitch, you know that you want to buy it.
But here's the thing. There's somebody out there who really likes banjo music, okay? That person could not buy a record for most of the recording industry's history. Now, there's a group of people who can make their banjo music and put it out there, and a small audience of banjo people can support them. Probably can't make a great living doing it, but you might be able to make some. That's something that was never possible before, and now now we might think it sucks, but if you like banjo music, this is the renaissance.
You just described the redefining of the process,
Yeah.
because Tom's not going to buy
Right.
the banjo script.
Actually, I just did. Watch TBS tomorrow night, 9 o'clock.
You'll be hearing from
Banjo.
my lawyers shortly.
Banjo and Bobby. It's Bobby Befriends Banjo. Animated program. We'll get you the details after this program.
All right. Well, with all that being said, then how can educators how can that help the process as we move forward? Because you were hinting at it.
Yeah, I think it's like, very simple. Though I disagree with these two a little bit that creators and viewers are the same. I can get into that later. But I think that teaching, like for me, as you put it, there's 500 scripts. 490 stink or suck. He said it. Sorry, Gabriel. And father.
Suck is, I think that's sort of
We know what it means. So, long story short is that he's right. There's not that many talented people. Like you said, no matter how much digital equipment is out there, and cameras and editing and script and people who are writing scripts on the computer, guess what? The majority are going to stink. You have to have a skill, a trade, to learn and to go to school and learn these skills. And going to school, going to Seton Hall, and I'm sorry, I'm going to do a little shout out right here because it meant something. You know, people like you, like Wiki, Alice Sparrow, they were guys who like brought us and taught us, people who work in the industry, and just did it because I came out here when I was 22 years old. And guess what? I had a storytelling sensibility, and I was the first person at Seton Hall to use a digital editing system.
That's what he was doing in the editing room. He was actually, because I didn't know how to use it.
With that Turkish wedding. By the way, there was a lot of yelling, but I figured it out with a Madonna song, and it all came together. And my point is that being in a small environment, Tom was in my environment. We saw this. We just.
By the way, this came up earlier. True story. I haven't seen him since college. He may or may not have cried when we worked together.
And it was May. I think I did have a meltdown in my final project. And it was people like Professor Rondinella who, taught me the right things, got me through it because I cared about it. And when I came out here, I learned a lot about working in television, but I had a very strong background. And I could say I learned it from being in classes with you guys.
Any questions? I think some questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions?
I wanted to actually
Want to add something?
You have a question?
Sure.
Yeah,
Or what if we have questions for the audience?
yeah, actually, I would.
Miss, you right there, in the
You had
glasses.
brought up the communal experience, and it's funny because I sort of feel like the thing I fear about teaching is that it will be behind the times. I know right now, like the industry
That's interesting.
is behind the times. Like I literally a couple hours ago, I was talking to my agent, and she said, everyone I talk to in the business says I don't know how to do my job anymore. And that's very disturbing but it's true that the industry is supporting there's still a business going on, sort of just like in the early 1970s, there was an old movie, they were making old movies when movies had changed, when television was changing things. That's still happening, and I hope that teaching will catch on. I think it's amazing that you're teaching cell phone filmmaking because that's really a good idea. I think that the most important thing is to recognize that we have no idea what's happening next.
But it's also important to learn, like what you said before, it's great to teach somebody how to shoot on a cell phone. Right. What are you going to shoot with this?
Well, that's the thing is that you need to be able to teach the basics, the skills, but you need to be able to teach them without saying the past is going to be the future, because then you're going to be
But then that's why it's very important that my alum, the people that are working in the industry, communicate with me to know what's happening in the industry that I might be missing. I mean, that cell phone thing came because we were watching Star Ledger's doing that kind of stuff. So we figured we needed to, because we knew students were doing it and they were doing it badly, so we needed to refine it.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Questions for us? Yes. Shout it. I'll repeat it. So.
I saw my big fat Turkish wedding, by the way. That was a great film. I teach, and this is going to get more into the. Thank you. Hello. I teach, so I'm going to talk maybe from the teaching point of view. And you mentioned YouTube. The course I teach is spirituality in sports, and so what I do is I have two textbooks that I use. But I would say 75% of what we do in class, and this is to get the perspective of professional athletes or collegiate athletes, 75% of what I do is I go to YouTube and I get segments of where athletes talk about what their faith means to them in terms of their sport. And it's really annoying because I've learned I can't show YouTube video directly because ads pop up and all this stuff kind of happens. I sort of learned, I found a converter for YouTube, so I sort of figured that out. But I would say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got, and I don't know how I got this, but it was a survey from some company, and it's all clicking now as you guys are talking, to say, how much video do you use as part of your class? How much? And so I took the survey. because I thought it was asking me exactly what I was perceiving as a real problem for me in trying to teach my course. And so I don't know what my question here really is, other than the fact that
We get it, you're a teacher.
That's what professors do.
and, you know, and I don't suck as a teacher, by the way. Anyway, so I guess I know this is but my point is, you know, as a teacher from the educational point of view, I'm wanting to use a lot of digital video stuff because textbooks are nice now, but I think it's moving more into other stuff. And how do I do that? How do I not have to get watch YouTube, but I can't watch with them because of pop-up ads and everything?
Just subscribe to all the ads.
I mean, you would probably know better. I mean, that you might be able to copy it and.
Yeah, I don't.
No, I think you're talking about, I think there has to be a whole redesign of what a textbook is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's much more interactive.
Actually, it's interesting. I taught a few classes at UCLA Extension, and the first term I was like, I will not show any clips. It's cheating. It's like showing movies in class was always it's cheating. And at a certain point, I asked the students what they wanted. I said, could you show some clips? and I started to, and I found that in fact it was incredibly valuable. After a while, I began to think about the fact that like my son, I learn a lot from my son. He's 13. He's the only way I know what's going on. And when he wants to learn something, he goes to YouTube. And in fact, and I hope the president doesn't get mad at me, but the idea that schools should be reaching out by way of these portals is probably a good idea, because if I was going to teach screenwriting right now, I would probably do it on YouTube. I would figure out a way to divide classes into small segments where people can
It's like
see
watching
when
like
they
Khan
want.
Academy.
Right, and then you can do Skyping and stuff. I mean, it sort of reminds me of what you said about the communal experience, because I'm not sure that we're losing that. I think we're just changing it.
We're not losing
That
it.
in fact, the
Community
community is
shifting.
just bigger. It's like the fact is, if I make a movie now, I can get it to. I mean, I made an independent film in 2007, and I get emails from people all over the place that never would have seen it if I could only show it in theaters. But because it's out there, in this other kind of community, I think that it's sort of like there was a time when, like Paris or New York or Seattle, there's times when the culture comes together in certain places and becomes exciting and everyone is like, it's happening there. I think the internet is that place now. I think that that's where you should go.
I have a question. Spirituality in sports. So what happens when the winning team says, thank you, God? I mean this, I'm not being snarky. What is it saying? Is it also saying, but thank you for letting that team lose? What is the thought?
You'll have to take my class.
Okay.
Good answer.
By the way, I love that class. I think that's such a fantastic class. Yeah. Okay.
Any questions? Any other questions? Yes.
I heard some very spirited debate about from your unique perspectives tonight, and one thing that I noticed you did agree on is there are lots of different types of number ones. But what I'm dying to hear is, in your opinions, what makes a number one from your various perspectives?
That's a great question, and it's something that I'm dealing with right now. So I've just been a seller for the last year, and now I work at TBS. I buy shows, but I used to sell my whole career. I worked for Steve Carell mostly. I worked at The Daily Show forever, and it used to be very simple: ratings. How many people watched it? Well, actually, how many people that had Nielsen's box watched it? I didn't know anybody that had a Nielsen box, but still, that's somehow
Right, yeah.
And so it was sheer numbers. But it's a great question, because now the metric is called buzz. And everyone's like, I want the show that's buzzy. That's the show that's most successful. Personally, I think you can measure it by like good reviews. But the shows that are buzzy, not the shows that, look, if you're a Big Bang Theory, which I'm sure, based on the numbers that watch it, 80% of you in this room watch it, 15 million people watch it. Unquestionably, it's, personally I don't think it's a great show, but it gets 15 million people. I saw the girl in it, what's her name? And pardon?
Kelly Coco.
Yeah, Kelly Coco. I saw her at a bar. And I said, oh, what do you do? That shows you how good I am at my job. This was like 2 weeks ago. She said, I'm an actor, because she was a friend of a friend. And then I said, oh, like, what do you want? She said, Big Bang Theory. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, it's dark in here. And I said, because I had a few blessings last summer, and I said, you know, I love that show. The thing that I don't understand about Big Bang Theory is those people aren't relatable to me. They feel like nerds are nerds, and nerds are having a great time right now. Everybody loves nerds, which is great. It's like people love intellects, not jocks. But I said, but the problem with that show is they all seem like aliens to me. They don't seem relatable, human. And she said, well, 15 million people would have disagreed with you last night. She was right. And so if you have a show that has 15 million people, that's the metric. But your Louis of the world on FX, the Americans on FX, there's shows that get viewerships that are The Daily Show gets less than 1 million people a night.
But
and those shows are buzzworthy. And so I hear my bosses say, we need a buzzy show.
Right.
What does that mean? We don't know, but that's what's measuring success. So that's a great question.
But to Tom, what you were just talking about, like the Big Bang Theory is to me, not a buzzy show, right? Like
Right.
if someone asked me, I'm like, that's definitely not buzzworthy. But a show like Louis is 100%. So how do you find, like, I guess the bigger question to me is like what you said, how difficult now is to put that finger on, because Nielsen's out the window, like, you know, you're not looking for Nielsen ratings. You're like, how do we create something buzzworthy? Does it go back to the writer? Does it go back to who's, you know, like making it, you know, like what are you looking for to create that buzz?
I think that this is sort of what I was thinking, was that it's no longer almost a relevant question, is that what's number one within the context of the thing you're looking at. Like, first of all, number one is sort of a business question. You know, in other words, number one of ticket sales or viewers or hits or whatever, that's a business metric. Number one of quality of artistic quality may or may not have to do with awards, or may not have to do with the passion of the people who do it. I think that you have to, what's happened, and this is just recent, is that question became less relevant. It's relevant within the context that you're in. Like, I write part-time for a Nickelodeon sitcom, and we get a tiny audience, but we are doing well compared to the other things in our slot on our show, so that the network considers us a hit. So we're like, yay, we're a hit. And if I go and meet somebody else in the business, I say I'm on Nickelodeon show, they're like, really? That's awful. and it doesn't matter, because when I go to work, I'm a hit. And the important thing about that is that it's no longer a case of that there's like, it's like the industry was like high school, and there were these cliques and everything was all set up, and you knew where you were, and everyone agreed on the rankings. And now that's all gone. You know, you're just in a different school. So, you know, I think that the first thing you have to do is recognize that your ratings or your rankings or your value is only relative to what your ambition is or what your ability to sustain yourself is.
I have one more thing to add.
Did you think your question would last this long in answers?
Exactly what I asked.
You know, Tom said something before, you know, what's buzzy? And I just, a perfect example of what you were saying, and with digital, about how like available it is now. Like if you, there's like cooking shows are all over. They're very prevalent now. It's like Cooking Channel, TV Food Network. You know, people are watching them all the time. It's like none of those are buzzy. Well, guess what's buzzy? There's a show on the internet by a rapper called Action Bronson. Excuse my language, called Fuck That's Delicious. He's a rapper. He literally, it's on tour. People are filming it with their cameras on their phones and their DSLRs, like you're saying, like they bought $1,000, you know, 4 3/3 camera, and it's costing nothing to make. And guess what? It's buzzy. People around the internet are sending the clips. You know, that's what people want to watch.
There's also with a drunk chef too, isn't it a woman that drinks and she cooks on
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
I did a cooking show for 3 years, and it's all about personality. It has nothing to do with food. No one really cares about the food. It's all about watching the person cook and what they have to, how they interact. And I learned that on that show because we had a coach our host a little bit.
But it's perfect about what you're talking about. It's like what's making money. These shows, you know, like this guy who's on the Vice, he's on Munchies on Vice, and that's the buzz show right now. So that's what's being, people are talking about it. It's being tweeted,
But I
it's
think,
being
but I think
Facebooked.
at some point though, I mean, for myself, I could just say, for me to be chasing that, what's the number one thing for myself? Either my tastes are just different, and my whole goal in doing any of this is to communicate what I think people should know, and sometimes they don't want to know what I have to say, and that's okay with me. And sometimes you'll touch people with what you have to say, and some of them they don't want to hear, and sometimes they want to hear it. So it's basically, for me, it's a communication device, and I think sometimes we forget that. Like, what are we trying to say with all this stuff? It really comes down to the basics of, you know, what are we trying to say? What's the whole point of doing it? Like, there's this thing of drunk history. It's like, you guys,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean, I don't.
You know,
I literally just got off
But the
that
thing
job.
is, I mean, like, if you
Did you
are,
really get over that
I
job?
literally just got off that job.
I just don't get it.
and a lot of things that are going on, there's sort of some media centers like New York and LA, and the business that communicates with it, and within that group, and they don't communicate with a lot of the rest of the world. And so a lot of what you're hearing is what they think is cool. But if you are a punk, then the values that you have, like if you make punk music and somebody else can say, that's really loud and aggressive and unpleasant, and so we'll go, yes! And everyone else will be like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. So you sort of need to choose what standard you're trying to apply to, and that has changed. That there is still a mainstream media, it's just now getting a smaller slice of the mainstream, and the other places are getting legitimacy on their own. And that's not going to change. That's not going to get less. That's going to get more.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hello.
Oh,
Can you hear me there?
yes, I'm here.
How is it quantifiable? You talk about smaller slices. It's really buzzworthy, and people are selling ads for whatever hits they're getting, but it's not 15 million people. So how much money can you make if you're buzzworthy all over the place?
You can make a lot, and it's funny that we're a network.
Right.
And what's important to us, one of the things that is important to us is not only getting a hit. First of all, you need good content to have the argument at all, and then what do you do with it? But we're done.
No, he's not.
He's saying, "I wanna kill you?"
No, it's for me.
Get rid of it.
Now there's a market. First of all, you could sell internationally. So shows like Anger Management, which my girlfriend's on, is a horrible show. She's fantastic. Watch it. But it does well internationally. Number two, now you can sell to, and this is such a longer conversation, but you can sell to Netflix. And if you sell your last seasons to Netflix, you can sell it for millions and millions of dollars. So these networks, which used to be the kings, are now like, all right, we got to do things that Netflix is going to buy based on buzz, not based on numbers. TNT had a show called Last Ship. It's still on. It's a very good show. It's not very buzzy, but it gets good numbers. It does better than the Americans on FX. The Americans will sell for more money to Netflix because it's buzzier.
And partly because they spent more money advertising it, which Netflix is the king of. I mean, Netflix has
Well,
bought.
TNT actually spends. That's actually they did a kickoff at the San Diego. What's the
Comic-Con.
They had a ship that they had their premiere. I mean, they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it wasn't because of marketing.
But I mean, just in terms of like bus ads, commercials, and stuff like that.
But also, it's not an edgy.
Yeah.
Last Ship is a good show. It's not a great show. Americans is a little bit edgier, a little bit more provocative, a little bit more contemporary, and it got better reviews by far, critically. And so it sells to Netflix. So they make money in these different places because of buzz.
I think that's the end of our time here. I want to thank my panel. You guys were terrific. Thank you very much. And more importantly, I thank you guys for coming out.
I will.